The Infragistics NetAdvantage ASP.NET WebGauge is a control that's perfect to create dashboard views for many types of applications, such as aggregating corporate data for high-level management views, building energy monitoring systems that obtain sensor information and display it in gauge-like displays, or anything else that would be perfect for displaying values with needles or markers along a range of acceptable values. The WebGauge control has lots of features that can help support you in creating your user interfaces, such as the gauges collection. So the WebGauge control in itself is a web server control, and you place it on the form, and it has a gauges collection. So this means that you can add many types of gauges to this one web server control, so that one web server control can actually appear to have multiple gauges arranged however you like on its surface. There's also several gauge types. For example, the one that you see right now is a radial gauge, but you also have linear gauge and digital gauges as well, which I'll show you some examples. You also have the ability to configure tick marks, which are the little indicators at varying frequencies along a range. You also have the ability to configure and format different types of labels that indicate various values. And markers are also another feature that allows you to essentially create and configure any shape of needle or indicator of current values along the range. And you could also annotate values on the gauges. So an annotation essentially is a type of graphic, such as an ellipse, box, or any other type of shape that kind of points out and alerts end users to a certain condition. So some of the configurations that you can perform with this gauge control are shown here in these examples that I'm showing you. So right now we have radial gauges with range, with tick marks and labels, and a marker set at a certain value. Here we have a gauge which is designed to contain multiple markers that show multiple values. Here we'll show a digital gauge, which is another type of gauge that is supported in this control. So a digital gauge essentially consists of unlit segmented displays which are used to indicate your values. So in other words, you could assign a string to this gauge and it will pretty much render that according to the lit and unlit segments in each character, pretty much like an alarm clock. Then we have linear gauges as well. So linear gauge is pretty much a control that's designed to show values along a straight line, whether it's horizontal or vertical, and here's some various examples. You have 101 presets given to you by Infragistics that are professionally designed by our graphics design team. I'm sure one of these will be able to provide you with a great starting point, which you can further customize if you like. Here's some other examples where the gauge is designed to look like a knob or an instrumentation panel knob. Here are radial gauge examples that are designed to look like a car dashboard type of view. So again, these are infinitely customizable. Here we have multiple ranges because of the ability to work with the gauges collection off of the gauge control, where you could actually place multiple gauges on one control. Here's another example with multiple gauges, but they're located in different areas, as well as this one where we have a small gauge and a much larger gauge. So you can pretty much let your creativity run wild with the WebGauge control and create any type of gauge to represent your corporate data or your sensor data. These gauges will be perfect if you collect sensor data from various building systems, such as current generated by, let's say, if you have wind powered or photovoltaic powered electrical generators that collect solar energy or use wind energy to generate electricity. You could show how much power is being generated, and you could also compare that against to how much energy is being used by the building. So there's a lot of applications being built out there these days that allow building managers to review instrumentation in the form of gauges such as these and make decisions in order to cut back on energy costs, because energy costs are rising. Here's some more examples, and again, these are all attainable by just simply setting properties on the control, the start extent, the end extent of the various objects within the actual gauge control itself. Gauges are also perfect for corporate dashboards, such as today's sales, and you could have different gauges across your user interface that represent various regions of your organization, how sales are doing, or incoming incident rates, or customer calls, or anything of that sort. So the gauge control essentially can be output in different ways. So the default output will be an image. You can also set it up so that the image is stored on the file system of the server, or the image is streamed from within the session state of the current request. So in other words, using another control or another component that we have called the gauge image pipe, that allows you to easily create an application that actually streams the image from the session variable that's stored, and it's all done automatically behind the scenes. You don't write any code to do that. Simply use the gauge image pipe, and you set a property on the gauge control to point to the ASPX page that has the gauge image pipe component, and Infragistics handles the rest behind the scenes for you. So the image is not stored on a file system. It's stored in the session, so no one else can access it or try and guess the URL, or if they can guess it, which is virtually impossible because it's randomly generated, they'll never be able to see the image. So this is the Infragistics Net Advantage ASP.NET WebGauge control. Thanks for watching.
Infragistics. On the web at infragistics.com.